Welcome to Unity Spiritual Center, Pflugerville, on Memorial Day weekend. So from now on, we're in summer. We got it? Which means we're laid back and enjoying. And as Marty said, we're preheating, ready for the Texas summer, right? So, and I think that means heat. Anyway, if we work with past ideas, yeah, that means heat. Memorial Day is a very, very interesting period of time. It's a period of time where a lot of us have memories of things that are not the most pleasant thing in the world if you think about it. But at the same time, it is a reminding that we don't want to go back. Today is a Memorial Day of the people that have died in defense of our freedom and of our right to be gathering here today. Believe it or not, because a lot of countries throughout the world can't do that. And we forget about that. We take everything for granted. So it's a memorial that people have gone through amazing, amazing things in order to take care of us today. And it happens in a lot of ways. But one of the spiritual principles, and it's interesting because the next one we're going to talk about is service to others. And service to others is a spiritual principle that puts in place a spiritual life for us. So it's kind of like interesting that we are talking about service to others for us to gain our spiritual inheritance. So it's like we're right back to giving, to receive, and it's the cycle of giving and receiving that keeps things moving and going. And we just sang a song. It was interesting. I was using it, and now that we're recording this, I need to do it again. But welcome to a place that sees you as God. It's the song that we just sang. And then all part of it was, welcome to a place that you are God. And two of those things are, one is external, the other one is internal. Now here's the idea. Jesus said, when you do things to others, you do it to me. You do it for me. Which means that Christ is in all of us. And Jesus is also quoted as saying, these things I do, you shall do. He's quoted as saying, the kingdom of heaven is within. He's quoted, it's the Father's good pleasure to give the kingdom. So it must mean that there's a consciousness that is like us, that Jesus is saying here, you can do these things. So, and it's interesting, quantum physics has reached the point where they're pretty clear that you watching something changes the outcome of what you watch. Now, I don't want to get involved in string theory and all that kind of stuff. But the idea behind it is you influence events in the outside world. Take it in. You influence, your thinking influences things in the outside world. So when you look at something, maybe you influence the outcome of what you're looking at. Now, anybody agree? Now, see, this is the idea. And the conversation, and let me get it here. I've got it here somewhere. There it is. This was in the article I wrote. Service to others in the community is another spiritual principle to consider. Serving others through acts of kindness, positive outreach, and volunteer work can be another way to connect with the divine and contribute to the greater good out here. And here's the next phrase. Just pondering on the law of attraction. That what you think about and what you do is what you attract. So I go on and say, just pondering on the law of attraction that says what you share, you receive in kind, helps to understand that spiritual principle. So when I look at you and I see you as God or as perfect and whole, what am I creating? And you understand the conversation. So when Jesus says service, and again, get involved in the metaphysical interpretation here. And in looking at the metaphysical interpretation, I was, by the way, this is a new book. Look at this. This is New Testament. It says the New Testament metaphysically interpreted, and this is put out by the Pflugerville Bible Society. Hi, come on in. I hear you, Jen. So, and this is a brand new book. I hadn't seen it before. This was a gift, frankly, from the Carries. It's really neat. And this was just published. And it's really fascinating. Anybody familiar with the parable of the Good Samaritan? Okay, and the Good Samaritan is the individual, and in the story, in the Bible, in Luke, it says that a man was robbed and beat up and left alongside of the road, and a priest passed him, ignored him, kept home, and then a Levite went past. So, and then the third person that went past was a Samaritan. Now, here's an idea. Everybody ready? Whether you know it or not, way back then, Samaritan was a tribe of people that lived in the northern part of that area, and they were outsiders. The people in the city didn't like them. Everybody got it? They had discriminatory attitudes toward them, and they had to be kept over there because they weren't as good as the rest of us. Anybody familiar with that idea? It's endemic in our culture today. And yet the Samaritan is the one that stopped and took care of the individual, got him into a local hotel at that time, I don't remember what it was in or what it was, and then paid for him with the innkeeper until he could heal himself and go on his own. So, again, stop and think about this. The Bible says a lawyer, Jesus was in a gathering, a lawyer, and they use the word lawyer, so help me. Okay, and the metaphysical Bible says that the lawyer is significant, a metaphor for the human idea that makes rational thought, that figures things out. Anybody familiar with that? And it's always based upon what? What I learned from the outside. So we've got, are you ready? Systemic racism. Okay? And here it is, a metaphysical interpretation in the Bible. And the religious person went by, and another religious person went by and did nothing. Because they didn't want to get involved. It wasn't good. And then somebody that was thinking other than, let's say, the rules of the law or the rules of society, saw it with compassion and did something. So now we're talking complete spiritual wealth. And so the whole story of the principle of service to others is, what do you see? What do you see? Okay, now, a lot of us spend time, well, not a lot of us, that's not right. I should say some people spend time figuring out what should be and what's the right thing to do. And unfortunately, most of the time, the right thing to do is based upon what the world thinks is the right thing to do. Okay, now, if anybody's traveled here in the United States or overseas, anybody agree regions are different? It's fascinating to me. I had the opportunity to be in a group yesterday, and there were people from all over the United States. It was really interesting to me. There was a couple of people that had not been in Texas, and they were wandering around Texas. And it fascinated me that it is different. Having lived in the Northwest, believe me, things up there are different than they are here. Now language is different. Anybody familiar with euphemisms, figures of speech in different areas? Okay, and things are changed. But the human compassion of seeing only good is a spiritual principle, not a natural man spiritual principle. Okay? So what we're doing is talking about today. It's ironic today that Memorial Day fall on this day when I'm talking about this. Because Memorial Day is remembering the contribution through the ultimate sacrifice, if I can use that terminology, of people that serve their community, and how do we hold them in thought? And do we bless that and know that the highest and best came out of that? Or there are people that say they wasted their lives. And is that compassion? I wouldn't think so. Okay, so the question is, what do we do with our thinking? And we see somebody that's homeless, do we see them as the Christ, or do we see them as broken? Anybody here have family members you'd rather not think about? So you see, the ultimate crucible of relationship is family. And if you don't believe me, wait until your next gathering. Okay. And the truth is, in that intimate gathering, people have opinions about each other, And those opinions then create how those people act, if I can use that terminology. So the kingdom of heaven is within, as we see, as Jesus talked about, seeing the spiritual sight, not physical sight. So the spiritual sight is what he's talking about in the spiritual principle called service to others. Okay, now, volunteer, and I appreciate the volunteers here. By the way, I want to thank Mark and Tommy for setting up this morning, and last week too. And then Kathleen for setting up 3 weeks back. Okay, I think my daughter's coming back next week, so we're free. But anyway, when you serve, you have to go outside of your normal conversation, and you do it out of compassion. And we're right back, as a person thinketh in their mind, so are they. So when I'm thinking about compassion, what comes back to me? And I was remembered of an example. Everybody expects immediate results for everything. In other words, a tit for tat. If you do this, this happens. And guess what? Some of these things take time. Let me give you an example. And this is an example. I haven't used this in years. But it came back to me. It takes time, and you have to put the good in for the good to come out. Okay, so if I have a tube, let's say it's a tube about this round in diameter, and it's about that long. Okay? Now, if I believe that if I put dollar bills in that tube, okay, read it, and if I keep stuffing them in, when they come out the other end, they're going to be $100 bills. How many $1 bills would I create? And how long would I wait for it to build up enough that they started coming out the other end? Do you understand the time limit there? It might be a year, it might be 6 months, whatever it is. Would you get halfway and stop? Nope. But what would keep you stuffing dollar bills in? It's called faith. It's called trust. It's called knowing to believe that that's what I have to do. And I do it out of compassion because I know it's going to work. However, in today's world, we want everything instantaneously. I even get instant coffee, right? Instant tea, okay? Or instant disbelief. So we're dealing with a spiritual principle. We're dealing with all the spiritual principles, but it's a spiritual principle of service, and we expect. I can remember when I first started this, I had mentors in the beginning, and one of the things I was supposed to do was go to a food kitchen and serve in a food kitchen. Okay? So I did that, and I wound up in the kitchen cleaning pots. Okay, anybody ever clean pots, big ones? They had stuff caked on that people hadn't done properly. See, again, when you serve, you serve with integrity. Okay, so it's a very interesting conversation. And I remember thinking, well, okay, when's this going to happen? But the truth is, it was more my feeling and it was like, okay, why am I doing this? It was because I was told to. And I was told in the beginning that I didn't get the spiritual principle. This is way back. But I realized at the time that I was contributing to something bigger than I am, and it helped me understand that principle. And the only way to do it is to do it. And you don't go do it knowing that the $100 bills are going to come out. You just have faith that that part of it's going to happen. So it's called compassion. Compassion is love. Anybody define love for me? See, we try to take spiritual principles and explain them in material form. And we can't even explain what love is because we really don't know what love is until we practice. We do the practice and we're on a spiritual path. And then we can say, oh, yeah, that's what it is, but then try to explain it to somebody else. So what we're doing is we're doing something that rewards things immensely, but you can't explain it to the world. And the world wants dollar bills, yes? The world wants acclamation. The world wants power. And the power comes because the power, we get involved in power force. Again, the material world uses force. The spiritual world is power. And power means it happens automatically. It happens spontaneously. Look at Larry smiling. And see, that is the deep, dark secret, that there is no secret other than doing the spiritual principles. And we've been through that, okay? And love thy neighbor as thyself, the Lord thy God, spend time in quiet, and now we're talking about doing service. And you folks are really wonderful service. It's interesting that we got everybody out in the world today. We really do. You know, we've got some people in, Elvis is in California, we're people all over the place. And as you go out into the community, you take your spirit with you. So everybody wonders, when are things going to slow down? When are things going to get better? Things are going to get better when people start thinking the way you do. And you don't give up. And the troubles we're having today can diminish tomorrow if we stay with the principles. Okay? So we're looking at Memorial Day. Anybody have memories in their life? And the memories are, I would like to hear from some of you what you remember about a memorial in your life. When I say memorial, what was the tipping point? What made a difference? What did somebody do for you, or what did you see somebody else do? See, people do things because they're inspired to do it. People do things because they believe this is possible. Okay? Do you understand people that doubt and people that get afraid don't do things? And it's fear that holds us back, and it's somebody else encouraging us, somebody else telling us, hey, you can do it. I see you successful. And you don't even have to say it, you just have to see it. You understand that? And so as you go out into the world, that propagates. It takes, I don't know, it's like if you take compound interest and if you double the penny every day and double that at the end of 30 days, you've got what, $2 million, something like that. And so it's doing it, okay? And it's not being afraid to do it. And reaching out in compassion to serve others. And I'm saying service is more what you see and what you think than anything else. Okay? So anybody want to share? All I need is one person to start. We've got silence. Is anybody here? Yes, Adriana. This is Adriana, by the way.
The only thing that comes to mind right now when you ask that question is I have a memory back when I was really little, maybe 5, and I remember back at that time being in love with Jesus.
Yeah.
I feel it in my heart.
Somebody gave you that.
I don't know my mama, the church I was going to, but I remember that. And when I remember that, it gives me the courage to do everything else I do. It gives me the courage to keep, like you said, repeating the acts of kindness, my service.
Okay. See, that's the kind of thing. Anybody's been in service, I know Marty's been in service. I've been in service. But part of boot camp is indoctrination, right? Well, it really is. And you're building up the and part of that is we're building upon these people from the past. The honor, the glory that has been perpetrated through the military, okay, you are carrying that on. So you're part of the new banner, okay? Which is fine. That's what's true. Okay, we need models to continue, but we also need models of people that can see that in you. And see, that's your service. And we get too used to each other. Anybody getting familiar in a relationship? I've been married 54 years, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. It gets old. And it doesn't. See, we can continue to see each other, whatever it was that God stood there in the beginning. whatever it was. And sometimes it's lust, but it gets into love. It does. It becomes part of that conversation. Okay? So there's all kinds of possibilities in that conversation. I was going to give you more metaphysical interpretations, but we've done metaphor. But remember, the lawyer that sees things is trying to figure out what the world would do other than what Jesus would do, rather than what the spiritual self would see. And we deal in the spiritual level, not the physical level. So what are we creating? And when we serve, when we see others, we're creating what we want to see, not what we do see. And there's a lot that we don't want to see. Okay? Good. We're way ahead of time. I have enough. Who's supposed to be talking now? Nobody had a champion. The question is, who's your champion? Anybody ever championed you in life? Pat you on the back and said, "Oh, you can do this." Somebody said something to you at some point in time. You're going to be good at this. Yes? Okay? That's what we're talking about. And here's another thing, and you're going to get me started on this. Anybody like to be around happy people or sad people? So it's like, where does the fire come from? It comes from you. It comes from your spirit. And when you say good morning to people, you say good morning, or good morning, how you doing? Wow. Yes. And so it's that fire within you that, and people are going to think you're crazy because it matters. Okay? I'm called Pollyanna a lot, believe me, I am. But it's like, I notice, and I used to notice when I went into work, that the way the dice started for me is what I said to the first person. If I said, "Hey, how you doing?" things that day worked out. When I wouldn't say, "Well, I don't know," and then started complaining, what happened? The rest of the day was full of complaints. And I'm asking you to watch what happens when you project out the radiance of happiness, peace, and love. That's love. Okay? So the kingdom of heaven is within. It's the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom when you address the kingdom and work with it. And that addressing is service to others in what you see. And I see only love, I see only happiness, I see only success, and I see, believe it or not, we could put 50 people in there, by the way. I've counted. Have you counted? No, we can do that. Okay, now, the restroom would be overcrowded, but then that would be fine. We could let the men go out on the lawn.
You gotta have a bush in there first.
What?
You need a bush for them to do that.
Now, that's a joke, that's fun, that's not negative. You see where the mind goes? The mind goes, fantastic. Okay,